Chapter 9 of the Galaxy Primes by E. E. Doc Smith. The Galaxy Primes, Chapter 9. The Pleiades landed on Margonia's Galaxian field, where the Tellurians found the project running smoothly, a little ahead of schedule. Delcamp and Fow were working at their fast and efficient pace, but the hairy pair from Thaker seemed to be literally everywhere at once. "Hi, Belle." Fow ported up and shook hands warmly. "I thought I was going to have the first double prime baby until she appeared on the scene." "Didn't it make you mad? I'd have been furious." "Maybe a little at first, but not after I talked with her for half a minute. She'd never even thought of that angle. Besides, she thinks the whole galaxy is fairly crawling with double primes." "That's funny. So does Clee. But there are other things, strictly not angles, that she hasn't thought of too. If those coveralls were half an inch tighter, they'd choke her to death. You'd think she'd—" "Huh?" Fow interrupted. "You should scream. Oh, that ridiculous Tellurian prude." "It isn't ridiculous," Belle snapped. "And it isn't prudishness, either. Not with me, anyway. It's just that—" She ran an indicative glance over Fow's lean, trim flanks and hard, flat abdomen. "It spoils your figure. It's only temporary, of course, but—" "Spoils it? Why, how utterly idiotic! Why, it's magnificent. Just as soon as it starts to show on me, Belle, I'm going to start wearing only half as many clothes as I've got on now." "You couldn't." Belle eyed the other girl's bathing suit-like garment. Except for being blue instead of yellow, it was the same as the one she had worn before. "Not without the League for Public Decency sending the wagon out after you." "Oh, Miss Experience? Well, 3/4 maybe." "Hey, you two," came Delcamp's hail. "How about cutting the gab and getting some work done?" "Coming, boss." "'Scuse it, please." And two fast and skillful women went efficiently to work. With 6 prime operators on the job, the work went on very rapidly, yet without error. The Celestial Queen was finished, tested, and found perfect 1 full day ahead of James' most optimistic estimate for construction alone. The 6 primes conferred. "Do you want us to help you pick up the other primes?" Delcamp asked. "Your main, big as it is, will be crowded, and we have 3 ships here now instead of 1. "I don't think so, no," Garlock decided. "We told him we'd do it, and in the Pleiades, so we'd better. Unless, Alcine, you don't agree." "I agree. The point, while of course minor, is very well taken. We and our operators, we brought 6 along, experts in their various fields, can serve best by working on Tellus with its Galaxian society in getting ready for the meeting." "Oh, of course," Fow said. "Probably Deg and I should do the same thing?" "That would be our thought." The 2 Thakerns were thinking and lepping in fusion. "However," they went on carefully, "it must not be and is not our intent to sway you in any action or decision. While not all of you 4 perhaps are as yet fully mature, not one of you should be subjected to any additional exterior stresses." "I hope you don't think that way about all primes," Garlock said grimly. "I'm going to smack some of those kids down so hard that their shirt tails will roll up their backs like window shades." "If you find such action either necessary or desirable, we will join you quite happily in it. We go." The 4 remaining primes looked at each other in puzzled surprise. "What do you think about that?" Garlock asked finally, of no one in particular. "I don't understand them," Fow said, "but they're mighty nice people." "Do you suppose, Clee," Belle nibbled at her lower lip, "that we're getting off on the wrong foot with uniforms and admirals and things? That with really adult primes running things, the Galactic Service would run itself? No bosses or anything?" "Umph," Garlock grunted as though Belle had slugged him. "I hope not. Or do I? Anyway, not enough data yet to make speculation profitable. But I wonder, Miss Bellamy, if it would be considered an unjustifiable attempt to sway you in any action or decision if I were to suggest, oh ever so diffidently, that if we're going to saddle up our broncs and ride out on roundup tomorrow morning, we ought to be logging some sack time right now? Considering the source, as well as and or in connection with the admittedly extreme provocation, Bell straightened up into a regal pose, you may say, Mr. Garlock, without fear of successful contradiction, that in this instance no umbrage will be taken, at least for the moment. She broke the pose and giggled infectiously. Night, you two lovely people. Bell was still sunny and gay when the Pleiades reached Lazoria. Garlock was inwardly happy and outwardly content. Somolo, however, was his usual intransigent self. In fact, if it had not been for Maria Metalla and the fact that she, metaphorically, did pin Somolo's ears back, Garlock would not have taken him aboard at all. Thus, after loading on only one pair of primes, that auspiciously beginning day had lost some of its luster, and as the day wore on it got no better fast. Baver of Fauna had not learned anything either. Only Garlock's intervention saved the cocky and obstreperous Somolo from a mental blast that would have knocked him out cold. Then there were Onthave and Lurthy of Krenna, Coral and Kyrl of Gleer, Parlioff and Ginciona of Pasquerone, Atnim and Sotara of Flandoon, and 80 others. Very few of them were as bad as Somolo. Some of them, particularly the Pasqueronians and the Gleerans, were almost as good as Delcamp and Fowl. This was the first time that any pair of them had ever come physically close to any other prime. Many of them had not really believed that any primes abler than themselves existed. The Pleiades was crowded, and Garlock and Bell were not giving to any of them the deference and the consideration and submissive respect which each considered his unique due. Wherefore the undertaking was neither easy nor pleasant, and both Tellurians were tremendously relieved when the last pair picked up. They flashed the starship back to Tellus, and Delcamp, Fowl, and the Thakerns ported themselves aboard. "Give me your attention, please," Garlock said crisply. Then, after a moment, "Any and all who are not tuned to me in 5 seconds will be returned immediately to their home planets and will lose all contact with this group. That's better. For some of you, this has been a very long day. For all of you, it has been a very trying day. You were all informed previously as to what we had in mind. However, since you are young and callow and were thoroughly convinced of your own omniscience and omnipotence, it is natural enough that you derived little or no benefit from that information. You are now facing reality, not your own fantasies. Each pair of you has been assigned a suite of rooms in Galaxian Hall. Each suite is furnished appropriately. Each is fully Gunthered for self-service. This meeting has not been announced to the public, and, at least for the present, will not be. Therefore, none of you will attempt to communicate with anyone outside Galaxian Hall. Anyone making any such attempt will be surprised. The meeting will open at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning in the auditorium. The Thakerns and the Margonians will now inform you as to your quarters." There was a moment of flashing thought. "Dismissed." At 1 second before 8 o'clock, the auditorium was empty. At 8 o'clock, 98 human beings appeared in it, 6 on the stage, the rest occupying the first few rows of seats. "Good morning, everybody," Garlock said pleasantly. "Everyone being rested, fed, and having had some time in which to consider the changed reality faced by us all, I hope and am inclined to believe that we can attain friendship and accord. We will spend the next hour in becoming acquainted with each other. We will walk around, not teleport. We will meet each other physically as well as mentally. We will learn each other's forms of greeting, and we will use them. This meeting is adjourned until 9 o'clock, or rather, the meeting will begin then." For several minutes no one moved. All blocks were locked at maximum. Each prime used only his eyes. Physically, it was a scene of almost overpowering perfection. The men were, without exception, handsome, strong, and magnificently male. The women, from heroically framed Phao Talaho up or down to surprisingly slender Maria Metalla, all were arrestingly beautiful, breathtakingly proportioned, spectacularly female. Clothing varied from complete absence to almost complete coverage, with a bewildering variety of intermediate conditions. Color was rampant. Hair, or lack of it, was also an individual and highly variant matter. Some of the women, like Belle and Phao, were content with one solid but unnatural shade. One shaven head, Maria Metalla's, was deeply tanned but unadorned, even though the rest of her body was almost covered by precious stones. Another was decorated with geometrical and esoteric designs in eye-searing colors. A third supported a structure, it could not possibly be called a hat, of spun metal and gems. Among the medium and long hairs there were 2, 3, and multi-tone jobs galore. Some of the color combinations were harmonious, some were sharply contrasting, such as black and white. Some looked as though their wearers had used the most violently clashing colors they could find. The prize winner, however, was Taria of Thaker's enormous, inexplicable mop, and it was that phenomenon that first broke the ice. The girl with the decorated scalp had been glancing questioningly at neighbor after neighbor, only to be met by uncompromising stares. Finally, however, her gaze met another as interested as her own. This second girl, whose coiffure was a high-piled confection of black, white, yellow, red, blue, and green, half mastered her screen and said, "Oh, thanks, Jethay of Lodi Yan. I'm glad everybody isn't going to stay locked up all day. I'm Jinsiona of Pascaron. They call me Jin whenever they want to call me anything printable. And this," she dug a knuckle into her companion's short ribs, whereupon he jumped, whirled around, lowered his screen, and grinned, "is the boyfriend, Parlioff, also of Pascaron, of course. Both Jethay and I, call me Jet, everybody does," Jethay said, almost shyly for a prime. "Both Jet and I have been wondering about that woman's hair over there. How could you possibly give a head of hair a static charge of 50 or 100 kilovolts and not have it leak off?" "You couldn't, unless it was a perfectly insulated wig, but it looks as though she did at that," and Parlioff paused in thought. "Maybe Bayuk would have an idea or two," and Jet uttered aloud a dozen or so crackling syllables that sounded as though they could have been ladylike profanity. Whatever they were, Bayuk jumped too and tuned in with the other three. "Oh, it's quite easy, really," Taria said then. "Look." Her mass of hair cascaded gracefully down around her neck and shoulders. "Look again." Each hair stood fiercely out all by itself, exactly as before. "All you young people will learn much more difficult and much more important things before this meeting is over. I cannot tell you how glad I am that so many of you are here." And so it went all over the auditorium. Once cracked, the ice broke up fast. Phao and Delcamp worked hard. So did Bell and Garlock. Alcine was a potent force indeed. His abounding vitality and his tremendous smile broke down barriers that logic could not effect. And Taria worked near miracles, did more than the other 5 combined. Her sympathy, her empathy, her understanding and feeling were as great as Lola's own. Her operative ability was as much greater than Lola's as Lola's was greater than that of a bobby-soxed babysitter. Thus, when half of the hour was gone, Garlock heaved a profound sigh of relief. He wouldn't have half the trouble he had expected. It was not going to be a riot. And when he called the meeting to order, he was pleasanter and friendlier than Bell had ever before seen him. "While I am calling this meeting to order, it is only in the widest possible sense that I am its presiding officer, for we have as yet no organization by the delegated authority of which any man or any woman has any right to preside. Yesterday I ruled by force, simply because I am stronger than any one of you or any pair of you. Today, in the light of the developments of the last hour, that rule is done, except perhaps for one or two isolated and non-representative cases which may develop today. By this time tomorrow, I hope that we will be forever done with the law of claw and fang. For, as a much abler man has said, to the really mature mind, the concept of status is completely invalid. He's putting that as a direct quote, Alcine, and it isn't. Bell lanced the thought. He thinks it is, Alcine flashed back. That is the way his mathematician's mind recorded it. This meeting is informal, preliminary, and exploratory. A meeting of minds from which, we hope, a useful and workable organization can be developed. Since you all know what we think it basically should be, there is no need to repeat it. I must now say something that a few of you will construe as a threat. You are all prime operators. Each pair of you is the highest development of a planet, perhaps of a solar system. You can learn if you will. You can cooperate if you will. Any couple here who refuses to learn, and hence to cooperate, will be returned to its native planet and will have no further contact with this group. I now turn this meeting over to our first moderators, Alcine and Teria of Thaker, the oldest and ablest prime operators of us all. Thank you, Garlock of Tellus. One correction, however, if you please. I who speak am neither this man nor this woman standing here, but both. I am the prime unit of Thaker. For brevity, and for the purposes of this meeting only, I could be called simply Thaker. Before calling for general discussion, I wish to call particular attention to 2 points, neither of which has been sufficiently emphasized. First, the purpose of a prime operator is to serve, not to rule. Thus, no prime should be or will be boss of anything, except possibly of his own starship. Second, since we have no data, we do not know what form the proposed galactic service will assume. One thing, however, is sure. Whatever power of enforcement or of punishment it may have will derive not from its primes, but from the fact that it will be an arm of the Galactic Council, which will be composed of operators only. No prime will be eligible for membership. Thaker went on to explain how each pair could obtain instruction and assistance in many projects, including starships. How each pair would, when they were mature enough, be coached in the use of certain abilities they did not as yet have. He suggested procedures and techniques to be employed in the opening up of each pair's volume of space. He then asked for questions and comments. Somolo was the first. "If I'm a good little boy," he sneered, "and do exactly as I'm told, and take over the region you tell me to, and not the one I want to, what assurance have I that some other prime, just because he's a year older than I am, won't come along and take it away from me?" "Your question is meaningless," Thaker replied. "Since you will not take over, or have, or own any region, it cannot be taken away from you." "Then I will—" Somolo began. "You will keep still," came a clear, incisive thought, just as Garlock was getting ready to intervene. Miss Metalla then switched from thought, which everyone there could understand, and launched a 10-second blast of furious speech. Somolo wilted, and the girl went on in thought. "He'll be good, or else." A girl demanded recognition and got it. "Somolo's right. What's the use of being primes if we can't get any good out of it? We're the strongest people of our respective worlds. I say we're bosses and should keep on being bosses." Garlock got ready to shut her up, then paused, holding his fire. "Ah, yes, friend Garlock, you are maturing fast," came Thaker's thoughts, and in answer to Garlock's surprise, it went on. "This situation will, I think, be self-adjusting, just as will be those in the as-yet unexplored regions of space." The girl kept on. "I, at least, am going to keep on bossing my own planet, milking it just as I—" Her companion had been trying to crack her shield. Failing in that, he stepped in close and tapped her, solidly but with carefully measured force, behind the ear. Before she could fall, he ported her back up to their quarters. "This happens all the time," he explained to the group at large. "Carry on." Discussion went on with less and less acrimony all the rest of the day, and the next day and the next. Then, argument having reached the point of diminishing returns, the 3 starships took the 46 couples home. The 6 primes went into Evans' office, where the lawyer was deeply engaged with Gerald Banks, the Galaxian's public relations chief. Banks was holding his head in both hands. "Garlock, maybe you can tell me," Banks demanded. "How much of this stuff, if any, can I publish? And if so, how?" "Nothing," Garlock said flatly. "What do you think, Thaker?" Bell asked. "You're smarter than we are." "What Thaker thinks has no bearing," Garlock said. Bell, Fow, and Delcamp all began to protest at once, but they were silenced by Thaker himself. "Garlock is right. My people are not your people. I know not at all how your people think, or what they will or will not believe. I go." "That lets Deg and me out too, then double plus," Fow said with a grin. "So we'll leave that baby on your laps. We go too." "Well, little Miss Weisenheimer," Garlock smiled quizzically at Bell. "You grabbed the ball. What are you going to do with it?" "Nothing, I guess." Bell thought for a minute. "We couldn't stuff any part of that down the throat of a simple-minded 6-year-old. We haven't really got anything anyway. Time enough, I think, when we have 600 or 700 planets in each region, instead of only 1 planet. Maybe we'll know something by then. Does that make sense?" "It does to me," Garlock said, and the others agreed. "That Thakern we-go business sounds rough at first, but it's contagious. Fow and Deggy caught it, and I feel like I'm coming down with it myself. How about you, Clee?" "We go," Bell and Garlock said in unison, and vanished. Aboard the Pleiades, the next few days passed quietly enough. James set up, in the starship's memory banks, a sequence to mass-produce instruction tapes and blueprints. Garlock and Bell began systematically to explore the Tellurian region. Now, however, their technique was different. If either prime of any world was not enthusiastic about the project, "Very well, think it over," they would say. "We will get in touch with you again in about a year," and the starship would go on to the next planet. On Earth, however, things became less and less tranquil with every day that passed. For in deciding not to publish anything, Garlock had not considered at all the basic function and the tremendous ability, power, and scope of the press. And Galaxian Hall had never before been closed to the public, not for any hour of any day of any year of its existence. A non-profit organization dependent upon the public for its tremendous income, the Galaxian Society had always quartered that public in every possible ethical way. Thus, in the first hour of closure, a bored reporter came out, read the smoothly phrased notice, and leapt it into the desk. It might be worth, he thought, half an inch. Later in the day, however, the world's most sensitive news nose began to itch. Did or did not this quiet, unannounced closing smell ever so slightly of cheese? Wherefore Benjamin Bundy, the newscaster who had covered the starship's maiden flight, went out himself to look the thing over. He found the whole field closed. Not only closed, but Gunther-blocked impenetrably tight. He studied the announcement, his sixth sense, the born newsman's sense for news, probing every word. Regret, research, of such extreme delicacy, vibration, temperature control, 1/100th of 1 degree centigrade. He sought out his long-time acquaintance, Banks, finding him in a temporary office half a block away from the hall. "What's the story, Jerry?" he asked. "The real story, I mean." "You know as much about it as I do, Ben. Garlock and James don't waste time trying to detail me on that kind of business, you know." This should have satisfied any news hawk, but Bundy's nose still itched. He mulled things over for a minute, then probed, finding that he could read nothing except Banks' outermost, most superficial thoughts. "Well, maybe, but—" Then Bundy plunged. "All you have to do, Jerry, is tell me screens half down that your damn story is true." "And that's the one thing I can't do," Banks admitted, and Bundy could not detect that any part of his sheepishness was feigned. "You're just too damned smart, Ben." "Oh, one of those things. So that's it?" "Yep, I told Evans it might not work." That should have satisfied the reporter, but it didn't. "Now it doesn't smell just a trifle cheesy. It stinks like rotten fish. You won't go screens down on that one either." No comment. "Oh, joy!" Bundy exulted. "So big that Gerald Banks, the top press agent of all time, actually doesn't want publicity. The starship works. This lack of control stuff is the bunk. From here to another star in nothing flat. Garlock's back, and he's brought— What have you got in there, Jerry?" "The only way I can tell you is in confidence, for Evans' release. I'd like to, Ben, believe me, but I can't." "Confidence, hell! Do you think we won't get it?" "In that case, no comment." The interview ended, and the siege began. Newshounds and detectives questioned and peered and probed. They dug into morgues, tabulating and classifying. They recalled and taped and sifted all the gossip they had heard. They got a picture of sorts, but it was maddeningly confusing and incomplete. And, since it was certain that intersystemic matters were involved, they could not extrapolate. Any guess was far too apt to be wrong. Thus nothing went on the air or appeared in print, and although the surface remained calm, all newsdom seethed to its depths. Wherefore haggard Banks and harried Evans greeted Garlock with shouts of joy when the four wanderers came back to spend the weekend on Earth. "I'll talk to him," Garlock decided, after the long story had been told. "Have somebody get hold of Bundy and ask him to come out." "Get hold of him?" Banks snorted. "He's here, 24 hours a day, eating sandwiches and catnapping on chairs in the lobby. All you have to do is unseal that door." Garlock flung the door wide. Bundy rushed in, followed by a more or less steady stream of some 50 other top-bracket newspeople, both men and women. "Well, Garlock, perhaps you will give us some screens-down facts?" Bundy asked angrily. "I'll give you all the screens down." "Clee, you're crazy! You can't! Don't!" Bell and all the operators protested at once. Ignoring the objections, Garlock cut his shield to half and gave the whole group a true account of everything that had happened in the galaxy. Then, while they were all too stunned to speak, a grin of saturnine amusement spread over his dark, 5 o'clock shadowed face. "You pestiferous gnats insisted on grabbing the ball," he sneered. "Now, let's see you run with it." Bundy came out of his trance. "What a story!" he yelled. "We'll plaster it." "Yeah," Garlock said dryly. "What a story. Exactly." "Oh." Bundy deflated suddenly. "You'll have to prove it. Demonstrate it, of course." "Of course? You tickle me. Not only do I not have to prove it, I won't. I won't even confirm it." Bundy glared at Garlock, then whirled on Banks. "If you don't give me this in shape to use, you'll never get another line or mention anywhere." "Oh, no?" For the first time in his professional life, Banks gloated, openly and avidly. "From now on, my friend, who is in the saddle? Who is going to come to whom? Oh, brother!" When the fuming newsmen had gone, Garlock said, "It'll leak, of course." "Of course," Banks agreed. "It is rumored, from a usually reliable source," and so on. Nothing definite, but each one of them will want to put out the first and biggest. "That's what I figured. It'll have to break sometime, and I thought easing it out would be best. But wait a minute." He thought for 2 solid minutes. "But we're going to need a lot of money, and we're just about broke, aren't we?" This thought was addressed to Frank Macy, the Galaxian's treasurer. "Worse than broke. Much worse." "I could loan you a couple of credits, Frank," Bell said brightly. "But go ahead, Clee." People like to be sidewalk superintendents. Suppose they could watch the construction of an outpost so far away that nobody ever dreamed of ever getting there. Could you do anything with that, Jerry? "Could I? Just—" And Banks went into a rhapsody. "That's the first good idea any one of you crackpots has had for 5 years," Macy said suddenly. "But wouldn't transportation of material and so on present problems?" "No, just buying it," Garlock said soberly. "Or rather, paying for it." "No trouble there." "What?" Bell exclaimed. "No trouble? It says here in fine print. How the old skinflint has changed. Instead of screaming his head off about spending money, he's actually offering to. Frank, I'll loan you 3 credits. "Hush, honey child. The men folks are talking man business. Look, Clee, we'll use the Pleiades at first, while we're building a regular transport. 100 passengers per trip, 1,000 credits one way." "Wow," Bell put in. "Our ex-skinflint is now a barefaced, legally protected robber." "By no means, Bell," Evans said. "How much would that be per mile?" "Say 10 round trips per day. That would be 20 million a day gross for a small ship not intended for passenger service. When we get ships built, and the extras—" The money man went into a financial revel of his own. "Lots of extras," Banks agreed. "And oh, brother, what a public relations dream of heaven." "Maybe I'm dumb," Garlock broke in, "but just what are you going to use for money to get started?" "The minute we confirm any part of the story, the credit of the Galaxian Society will jump from XO to AAA1. "Oh, so Bell and I will have to lose our Pleiades for a while. I don't like that, but we do need the money. But we can have her for this coming week?" "Of course." "So maybe we'd better break the story now instead of letting it leak." "Can you, after what you just told them?" "Sure I can." He set his mind and searched. "Bundy, this is Garlock." "So, what am I supposed to do? Burst into tears of joy?" "Save it. I've changed my mind. You can break it as fast and as hard as you like. I'll play along." "Yeah? Why the switch? What's the angle?" "Strictly commercial. Get it from Banks." "And you'll, personally, go on my hour with it?" "Yes. Also, we'll demonstrate. Take you to any star system in the galaxy. You and all the rest of the newshawks who are here, and any 50 VIPs you want to invite. Tomorrow morning all right with you?" "You, personally, in the Pleiades?" Bundy insisted. "Better than that. The other 2 starships, too. You've got them, particularly those 4 primes, clearly in mind?" "Not exactly. There was so much of it. Spread it on me now, huh?" Garlock did so. "Thanks, pal, for the scoop. I'll crash it right now and follow up with Banks. Bye." "Think you can deliver on that, Clee?" Banks asked. "Sure. Both Deggy and Alcine will need a lot of extra money fast. They'll play along." They did, and that 3-starship tour, which visited 20 solar systems instead of 1, was the most sensational thing old Earth had ever spawned. Bell and Garlock did not spend that weekend on Earth. "We go," they said, as soon as the Pleiades was empty of pressmen, and they took James and Lola along. "If we never see another such brawl as this is going to be," Bell told Banks, who was basking in glory and entreating them to stay on for the show, "it will be exactly 20 minutes too soon." Thus it came about that Earth's first 4 deep spacemen were completely out of reach when unexpected developments began. Alonzo P. Ferber was one of the VIPs on Bundy's personally conducted tour of the stars. As has been said, he was a very able executive. He had an extremely keen profit sense. This new thing smelled, simply reeked, of money. SSE would have to get in on it. Ferber was not thin-skinned. Where money was concerned, it would never even occur to him to cherish grudges or to retain animosities. Wherefore SSE's purchasing department suggested to the Galaxian Society that negotiations be opened concerning licenses, franchises, royalties, and so on. These suggestions were politely but firmly brushed off. Then emissaries were sent of ever-increasing caliber and weight. Next, Ferber himself tried the tri-die, and finally he came in person. Rebuffed, he made such legally sound threats that Evans and Macy agreed to a meeting, stating flatly, however, that no commitments could possibly be made without the knowledge and approval of the Society's president, Cleander Garlock. Thus, at the meeting, the Galaxians made only two statements that were even approximately definite. One was that Garlock would probably return to Earth during the afternoon or evening of the following Friday. The other, that they would take the matter up with Garlock as soon as they could. After that meeting, Macy was unperturbed, but Evans was a deeply worried man. "You see," he explained, "the real crux was not even mentioned." "No? What is it, then?" "Operators, primes, and the practically non-existent loss pertaining to their, what, labor, skill, genius? For instance, could Garlock be forced to do whatever it is that he does? On the other hand, if Ferber offered Bell Bellamy 5 million credits a year to work for SSE, is there anything we could do about it?" "Oh, I thought all there was to it was that you'd delay 'em for a year or so, and that'd be it." "Far from it. To date, I have listed 58 points for which, as far as we can learn, there are no precedents," and the lawyer called a meeting of his staff. For Bell and Garlock, the week went fast. On Friday afternoon, high above Earth's Galaxian field, Garlock said, more than half regretfully, "No more fun. Back to the desk. Back to the salt mines." "I weep for you," Bell snickered. "Sob, sob. Shed him a tear, Lola." "One tear coming up. Oh, woe, oh, woe." "Oh, woe," James snorted. "Why the sob and moan routine, Clee, from a guy who's going to be monarch of all he surveys?" "His conscience aches him," Bell explained. "This monarching business is tough if you haven't thought about how to monarch, and he hasn't. Have you, Clee?" "Not a lick." Garlock smiled slightly. "I've been busy." "You'd better start to," she advised darkly. "You aren't busy now, and we have an hour. We better confer. I'll make like a slave driver." They ported into his room, and he set the blocks. His attitude changed instantly. "Nice act, Bell. What was it all about?" "That theory of yours. Your predictions are too uncannily accurate to be guesswork, and the more times you dead-center the bullseye, the worse scared I get. I really want to know, Clee." "Okay. It isn't complete. I need a lot more data, but I'll show you what I have. It's fairly strong medicine, and it comes in big chunks." "It would have to. It covers the whole macrocosmic universe, doesn't it?" "Yes. I'll start with the striking fact that, on every out-galaxy planet we visited, the human beings were Homo sapiens to n decimal places, fertile with each other, and, according to expert testimony, with us. All planets had humanoid guardians, the Arpalones and Arpales. Some, but not all, had one or more non-human, more or less intelligent races, such as the Fumaptis, the Lemarts, the Sencors, and so on. These other races never seemed to fight each other, but both races of guardians fought any and all of them, on sight and to the death. What do those facts mean to you?" "Nothing beyond face value. I've thought about them, but I haven't been able to come up with anything." "I have." He unrolled a sheet of drafting paper covered with diagrams, symbols, and equations. "But before I go into this stuff, consider the human body. How many red cells are there in your bloodstream?" "Billions, I suppose." "And there are billions of human beings on billions of planets, each having red blood cells identical, as far as we know, with yours and mine. Also white cells. Also, sometimes, various kinds of pathogenic microorganisms, such as staphs, streps, viruses, spiros, and so on. Okay, my thought is that the lemarts, ozorbs, and the like are analogous to disease-producing organisms. We saw the full range of effects, from none at all up to death itself. But they, the ozorbs and so on, died too. How long do disease germs live in a human body after they've killed it? But that horrible dilipic, the gollop, they don't seem to fit. Try that on for size as cancer. Also, the Arpalones typed us before they let us land on any planet. Why did we blast them out of the way and land anyway? Why, we didn't want to. It wasn't worthwhile. We couldn't. Psychic block. And if we had, we would have died. Different blood types don't mix. So you and I are merely two red cells in the bloodstream of a super-duper galactic super monster? Phooey, she jeered. That chestnut was propounded 1,000 years ago. Are you trying to take me for a ride on that old sawhorse? That's the attitude I had at first. So now we're ready for the chart. He pointed to a group of symbols. We start with symbolic logic, manipulating like so to get this. There was a long mathematical dissertation, a mind-to-mind, rigorous point-by-point proof. QED, Garlock concluded. I see your math, and if I believed half of it, I'd be scared witless. Those few pieces fit, but they're scattered around in vast areas of blankness, and you're jumping around like the Swiss Miss leaping from Alp to Alp. And how about our own galaxy, the most important piece of all? It's different, and we're different mentally. That wrecks your whole theory. No, I told you I need a lot more data. Also, beyond a certain point, the analogy appears to get looser. Appears to? It's as loose as a goose. Think a minute. Is it actually loose, or are we getting up into concepts that no human mind can grasp? That might be the case, you know. Oh, you're quite a salesman, Clee, but I'm still not buying. Our galaxy is a bit of specialized tissue, part of a ganglion, maybe. Over here, see? I'll have to leave it dangling until we find some more like it. I see. But anyway, you have a tenth's worth of real material on that whole sheet. Feed everything you have there into a computer, and it'd just laugh at you. Sure it would. The great advantage of the human brain is its ability to arrive at valid conclusions from incomplete data. For instance, what would your computer do with the figures you shot at me the day we started out? 39, 22, 39, 57, 135. Yet, they're completely informative. To anyone interested in that kind of figures, yes. Which includes practically all adults. Then take the figure 3.14159. Compy would still be baffled. But unlike the first set, most people would be too. Yes, perhaps 2 out of 10 would get your message. Now take something really new, like the original work on gravitation or relativity. No possible computer would be of any use. That takes a brain. The brain of a Newton or an Einstein, yes. Bell thought for a minute, then grinned at him impishly. Now watch the brain of a Bellamy perform. Get into high gear, brain. I wish I knew something about biochemical embryology, but I read somewhere that ova are sterile, so our galaxy is an ovum. Therefore, our supergalooper is a gal, which incontrovertible fact accounts for and explains rigorously the long-known truth that women always have been, are now, and always will be vastly superior to men in every quality, aspect, and— Hold it, Garlock snapped. His face hardened into intense concentration. Then, do you think you're kidding, Bell? Why, of course I'm kidding, you big— Look here, then. He picked up a pencil and filled in blank after blank after blank. I'm making one unjustifiable assumption, that the Pleiades is the first intergalactic starship. The superbeing is a female, and she is just becoming pregnant. Flapdoodle, there are no blood cells in a sperm, and I don't think there are any in an ovum. I didn't mention either sperm or ovum. The analogy is so loose here that it holds only in the broadest, most general terms. The actual process of reproduction is unknowable. But wherever we went, we changed things, not only by what we actually did, but also as a catalyst. No. No, not a catalyst, a hormone. Exactly. Each of these changes would cause others, and so on, an infinite series. Calling the first three terms alpha, beta, and gamma, we operate like this. Garlock's pencil was flying now. Following me? On your tail. Belle was breathing hard. As the blank spaces became fewer and fewer, her face began to turn white. From this we get that. And that makes the whole bracket tie into the same conclusion I had before. So except for that one assumption, it's solid. My lord, Clee, Belle studied the chart. I mentioned Newton and Einstein. Add to that the brain of a Garlock. Better than either. Then, seeing his reaction, You're blushing. I didn't think. Cut the comedy. You know I couldn't carry either of their hats to a dogfight. And I would never have believed that you are basically modest. I said cut out the kidding, Belle. I'm deadly serious. A brain that could do that, she waved at the chart. Well, even I am not enough of a heel to belittle one of the most tremendous intuitions ever achieved by man. Not that I like it. It's horrible. It denies mankind everything that made him come up from the slime, everything that made him man. Not at all. Nothing is changed in man's own frame of reference. It merely takes our thinking one step farther. That step, of course, isn't easy. That is the understatement of all time. What it will do, though, is set up an inferiority complex that would wipe out the whole human race. There might be some slight tendency. Also, since my basic assumption can't be justified, the whole thing may be fallacious. So I'm not going to publish it. He glanced at the chart, and it vanished. Clee! Belle stared, almost goggle-eyed. With your name? The tremendous splash. I see. You're really growing up. Not all the way, probably, but pretty nearly, I hope. But some of the, not exactly corollaries, but Belle's face, which had regained some of its color, began again to pale. Which of the many? The most shattering one, to me, concerns intelligence. If it is true that our vaunted mentality is only that of one blood cell compared to that of a whole brain, and that intelligence is banked level upon level, well, it's simply mind-wrecking. I've been trying madly not to think of that concept at all, but I can't put it off much longer. Now's as good a time as any. I'll hold your hand. You better hold more of me than that, I think. I'll do even that in a good cause. He put his arms around her, held her close. Go ahead, face it. All the way down and all the way up. You've got what it takes. You'll come back sane, and it'll never bother you again. She closed her eyes, put her head on his shoulder. Her every muscle went tense. Neither of them ever knew how long they stood there, close clasped and motionless in silence. But finally her muscles loosened. She lifted her head, raised her brimming eyes. All the way down? He asked. To almost a geometrical point. And all the way up? I touched the fringe of infinity. Intelligence all the way? All the way. I couldn't understand any of them, of course, but I looked each one squarely in the eye. Good girl. And you're still sane. As much so as ever. More so, maybe. She disengaged herself, sat down on the bed, lighted a cigarette, and smoked half of it. Then she stood up. Clee, if anything in the whole universe ever knocked hell out of anything, that did out of me. I'm going to do something that will take about 10 minutes. Will you wait right here? Of course. Take all the time you want. When she came back, Garlock leapt to his feet and stared speechlessly. He could not even whistle. Belle's hair was now its natural, deep, rich chestnut. Her lipstick was red. Her nails were bare, and she wore a white shirt and an almost knee-length crimson skirt. Here's what I'm going to do. she said quietly. I'm going to be a plain, ordinary brunette. I'm going to marry you as soon as we land. Registered permanent family. I'm going to have 6 kids and spoil them rotten. In short, I have grown up, partly at least, too. Plain? He managed finally. Ordinary? You? Yes, like a supernova going off under a man's feet. With a visible effort, Garlock pulled himself together. I don't need to tell you what a surprise this is, and can't tell you what it means to me. But you never have said you love me. Hadn't you better? I'm afraid to. Our next kiss will be different. I'd spoil all this nice new makeup. She tried to grin in her old-time fashion, but failed. She sobered then, and went on with a completely new intensity. Listen, Clee, I'm all done, forever, lying and pretending to you. I love you so much that, well, there simply aren't any thoughts. And when I think of how I acted, it hurts. Lord, how it hurts. I don't see how you can love me at all. It'd take a miracle. Miracles happened then. He put both arms around her, very gently. For the first time in my life, I'm cutting my screens to 0. Come in. What? For a moment, she was unable to believe the thought. Then, cutting her own shield, she went fully into his mind. Oh, I didn't dare hope you could possibly feel. Oh, this is wonderful, Clee. Simply wonderful. As the two fully opened minds met and joined, she threw both arms around him, and their embrace tightened as though their bodies were trying to become as nearly one as were their minds. Finally, she pulled herself away and put up a solid block. What a mess, she said shakily. Lipstick all over you. Why words, sweetheart? That was perfect. Oh, it was, but wide open, with such a mind as yours. She paused, then came back to normal almost with a snap. But say, I'll bet that's what Teria and Alcine were doing, that fusion thing. We'll practice it tonight. He pondered briefly. Sure it was. But he said they learned it from us. How could he have, when we... Oh, we did, of course, in moments of high stress, but we didn't actually know it. She paused. We wouldn't admit it, you mean, even to ourselves? Maybe. And, of course, it never occurred to us, callow youngsters we were then, weren't we, that it could be done for more than a microsecond at a time, or that 2 people could ever possibly live that way. Or what a life it would be. So let's chop this and get back to you and me. Uh-huh, let's, she agreed, but in a severely practical tone. You've got lipstick even on your shirt, so change it, and I'll go put on a new face and bring over some stuff and clean you up. While she cleaned, she talked. I told you our next kiss would be different, but I had no idea. Wow, that will be as much different too, I'm sure. Again, she pressed herself against him, this time in a somewhat different fashion. Stop that, you little devil, or I'll... His arms came up of themselves, but he forced them back down. No, I won't. We'll save that for tonight, too. I'll behave myself. She laughed, pure joy in voice, eyes, and smile. I bet myself you wouldn't, and I won. You're tall, solid gold, Clee darling, the absolute top. Thanks, sweetheart. I wish that were true, he said soberly. But I can't help wondering if 2 such hellions as you and I are can make a go of marriage. No, cancel that. We'll do it. All we have to figure out is how. I know what you mean. Not at first. It'll be purely wonderful then. After 5 years, say, when the glamour has worn off and I've had 3 of our 6 children, and 2 of them are in bed with the epizootic, and I'm all frazzled out, and you're strung up tight as a bowstring with overwork, and hold it. No. If we can live together 6 months, or even 6 weeks, without killing each other, we'll have it made. It's at first that it'll be rugged. No matter how rugged it gets, though, we'll know one thing for certain sure. We couldn't live apart. That'll give us enough leverage. Check? And double check. She giggled sunnily. I'll take care of any and all situations, whatever they are, that arise in the first 6 months. You'll be responsible for the next 60 years. That's a perfectly fair and equitable division of responsibility. Now kiss me, and we'll go. When Garlock cut the Gunther box, however, James' thought came instantly in. Been trying to get you for 20 minutes. And in a couple of seconds he brought Garlock and Bell up to date. So Fatso's been waiting in Evans' office. He's throwing fits all over the place, and Evans and Macy are going quietly mad. He'll have to wait, Garlock decided instantly. No matter how many fits he has, no such decision is going to be made until there's enough of a galactic council to make it. Well, you'll have to tell him that yourself, in person. I'll do just that, and tell him so he'll stay told. Okay, but shake a... Bell and Garlock poured it out into the main, arms around each other like a couple of college freshmen. Leg, gug, James gurgled. Bell, Lola shrieked. Why, Bell Bellamy! What goes on here? James demanded. Nothing much, Garlock replied, although he blushed almost as deeply as Bell did. We just decided to quit fighting is all. Cut the rope, Junior, and let the old bucket drop. The end of The Galaxy Primes by E. Doc Smith. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain.